The stars had always promised peace. For 40 years, humanity believed that promise. The Treaty of Prime was signed in the year 2307, and it was supposed to protect everyone. Humans and would respect each other. They would trade with each other. They would never harm civilians. That was the deal. That was the sacred agreement written in the halls of diplomacy and sealed with the hope of two species. Admiral Moore remembered the day the treaty was signed. He was a young officer then, standing at attention while politicians shook hands and smiled for the cameras. There were tall reptilian beings with scales the color of dark emeralds and eyes like burning amber. They spoke of friendship. They spoke of a new era. Moore had believed them. Now he stood on the bridge of the battleship Resolute, reading a distress signal that made his blood run cold. Colony New Helena had gone silent. The farming world was home to 2.3 million people. Families lived there. Children played in the fields under an alien sun. Teachers taught in schools. Farmers grew crops that fed a dozen other colonies. It was a peaceful place, far from any military installation, far from any strategic importance. The scout ships arrived 12 hours after the last transmission. They found nothing but ash and bones. Captain Laura walked across the bridge and handed him a. Her face was pale and her hands were steady, but could see the fury building behind her eyes. She had family on New Helena, a cousin and her 2 children. They were gone now, burned to nothing by weapons. The intelligence reports told the whole story. Intercepted communications revealed that the High Council had made a decision. They believed humanity was growing too strong. Human colonies were spreading across the galaxy. Human ships were getting faster and more powerful. Human technology was advancing at a rate that worried the Dominion. So they decided to send a message. The attack on New Helena was not an accident. It was not the work of rogue commanders or pirates or rebels. It was ordered by the highest levels of the government. They believed that killing millions of civilians would break the human spirit. They thought that humanity would see the destruction and fall to their knees begging for mercy. They had made a terrible mistake. Moore set down and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there they were celebrating. They were probably drinking and laughing, convinced that they had won a great victory. They did not understand what they had done. They did not understand who they had attacked. He opened a communication channel to Earth. The signal traveled across light years in seconds, carried by relay stations that humanity had built over centuries of expansion. When the connection established, he found himself looking at General. She was an older woman with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too many wars. She had led human forces through the border conflicts of 2298 and the pirate suppression campaign of 2315. She was tough and smart, and absolutely without mercy when mercy was not deserved. Told her everything. He showed her the images from New Helena. He played the intercepted communications. He explained what the enemy had done and why they had done it. General listened in silence. Her face did not change. Her eyes did not blink. When finished his report, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke 3 words that would echo through history. Gather the fleet. The order went out across human space. It traveled to military bases and patrol stations, to shipyards and training facilities. It reached every admiral and every captain, every commander and every lieutenant. The message was simple. The message was clear. Humanity was going to war. Captain began coordinating with other ships in the sector. The Resolute was a powerful vessel, but it was just one ship among many. They would need everything. Battleships and cruisers, destroyers and carriers, assault transports and supply vessels. They would need every weapon and every soldier that humanity could muster. Thought about the people of New Helena. He thought about the farmers who had tended their crops under a peaceful sky. He thought about the children who had played in the streets of small towns. He thought about the families who had trusted their government to keep them safe. They had killed them all, not in battle, not in fair combat, but in cold blood. They had murdered millions of innocent people because they were afraid of humanity's potential. They had broken the treaty that was supposed to keep everyone safe. And now they would learn what that meant. General appeared on screens across the fleet. She did not give a rousing speech. She did not talk about glory or honor or revenge. She simply stated facts. The Dominion had violated the Treaty of Prime. They had committed an act of genocide against a civilian population. The rules of engagement were being changed. There would be no negotiation. There would be no diplomacy. There would only be consequences. Moore watched his crew as the message played. He saw their faces harden. He saw their fear transform into something else, something cold and determined and absolutely unbreakable. These were not soldiers who wanted war. These were soldiers who had been given a sacred duty. They believed that humanity was soft. They thought that humans were weak creatures who hid behind treaties and laws. They imagined that a show of force would make humanity submit. They were about to learn the truth. When humans made a promise, they kept it. When humans signed a treaty, they honored it. But when someone broke faith with humanity, when someone murdered their children and burned their homes, humans did not forgive. Humans did not forget. Humans responded with final and absolute terms. The fleet began to move. Ships that had been scattered across dozens of systems started traveling toward a single point in deep space. They moved in silence, their communications encrypted, their intentions hidden from sensors. The enemy had no idea what was coming. Moore stood on the bridge of the Resolute and watched the stars slide past. Behind him, Captain was coordinating logistics and supplies. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency. They all knew what they were preparing for. They all knew that many of them would not survive the coming battle. But they also knew why they were fighting. They were fighting for New Helena. They were fighting for the 2.3 million people who would never come home. They were fighting to teach the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. The broken promise had started a war, and humanity intended to finish it. The gathering happened in darkness. No announcements were made to the public. No politicians gave speeches about justice or vengeance. The military moved in silence, pulling ships from every corner of human space, assembling the largest fleet in the history of the species. Commander Price received his orders at Station, a remote outpost near the edge of explored space. He commanded a squadron of 5 destroyers, small and fast ships designed for hit-and-run attacks. His crew was young and eager, most of them fresh from the academy. They had joined the fleet hopping to explore the universe and protect humanity from threats. Now they were being called to do something much darker. Gathered his officers in the briefing room and told them the truth. He showed them the images from New Helena. He let them see what they had done to innocent people. He watched their faces as understanding dawned, as horror transformed into cold fury. "The rules have changed," he told them. "There will be no prisoners. There will be no negotiations. We are going to hit them so hard that no alien species will ever think about attacking humanity again." His officers nodded. They understood. This was not about revenge, though revenge was certainly part of it. This was about survival. This was about showing the galaxy that humanity could not be bullied or threatened or massacred into submission. Far across human space, Dr. Collins sat in her laboratory and stared at photographs on her desk. They showed her standing beside scientists at a conference 3 years ago. She was smiling in those pictures. She had believed that friendship between species was possible. She had dedicated her career to building bridges between humans and aliens. Now those bridges were burning. Had spent years studying biology and culture. She knew their language and their customs. She had shared meals with researchers and discussed philosophy with scholars. She had genuinely believed that they were good people, that the Dominion's leadership was moving toward peace. She had been wrong. When the military came asking for her expertise, she did not hesitate. Everything she knew about physiology, about their weaknesses and vulnerabilities, she handed over. Her research was repurposed for weapons development. The knowledge she had gathered in the name of peace would now be used for war. Some of her colleagues called her a traitor to science. They said she was abandoning her principles, did not argue with them. She simply showed them the images from New Helena and asked if they still believed in friendship. Most of them joined the war effort within a week. Lieutenant was 23 years old when the call came. He had joined the fleet because he wanted to see the stars. He had dreamed of exploring unknown worlds and making first contact with new species. He had imagined a future of discovery and wonder. Instead, he found himself assigned to the assault carrier Defiance, preparing for combat operations against the was scared. He was not ashamed to admit it. He had never been in a real battle. He had trained in simulators and practiced with targeting systems, but he had never watched real ships explode. He had never seen real people die. But when he thought about New Helena, his fear turned into something else. Those colonists had been scared too. Those children had been terrified in their final moments. They had done nothing wrong. They had simply been human in the wrong place at the wrong time. The had killed them anyway. Checked his equipment and prepared for deployment. He told himself that he was ready. He told himself that he would do his duty. Deep down, he wondered what kind of person he would be when the fighting was over. The fleet assembled in the void between stars, a region of empty space far from any inhabited system. 300 warships gathered in formation, their running lights dimmed, their communications encrypted. They represented the full military might of humanity, everything that the species could bring to bear. Admiral Moore coordinated the operation from the bridge of the Resolute. Ships arrived at their assigned positions hour by hour, captains reporting in with quiet professionalism. There was no celebration. There was no excitement. There was only grim determination. General arrived aboard her flagship, the dreadnought Liberty. It was the largest warship ever built by human hands, a massive vessel bristling with weapons and carrying enough firepower to crack a planet. She had insisted on leading the attack personally. She said it was only proper that the highest-ranking officer share the risk with the soldiers under her command. The operation was called Final Terms. The name had been chosen carefully. It meant exactly what it sounded like. Humanity was not going to negotiate. Humanity was not going to bargain. Humanity was going to present them with final and absolute terms, and the Dominion would accept them or face extinction. General addressed the fleet via encrypted transmission. Her voice was calm and steady, without anger or hatred. She spoke like a doctor describing a necessary surgery. 40 years ago, we signed a treaty with the Dominion. We believed in peace. We believed in cooperation. We extended our hand in friendship and they bit it off. She paused, letting the words sink in. The attack on New Helena was not an accident. It was not a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate act of genocide designed to frighten us into submission. The High Council believes that we are weak. They believe that we will break under pressure. They are about to learn otherwise. Price listened to the transmission aboard his destroyer. Around him, his crew stood at attention. They were ready. Collins listened from a research facility orbiting Earth. Her expertise had helped design the weapons that the fleet was carrying. She hoped they would never be used. She knew they would be. Listened aboard the Defiance, his hands trembling slightly as he checked his fighter's systems. He was about to go to war. He was about to kill people. He was about to become something he had never imagined. The fleet waited in the darkness between stars. 300 ships, 200,000 soldiers and crew. Every one of them knew why they were there. Every one of them was ready to do whatever was necessary. They believed they had won a great victory at New Helena. They believed that humanity was broken and afraid. They had no idea that death was coming for them, gathering in the shadows, preparing to strike. The silent gathering was complete. The final terms were about to be delivered. The Ran was a beautiful planet. It orbited a red giant star, bathing its surface in eternal crimson twilight. Great cities rose from its continents, monuments to the power and glory of the Dominion. Orbital defense platforms circled the planet like protective guardians, bristling with weapons designed to destroy any threat. High Commander stood in the command center of the primary defense station and felt no concern. He had received reports that human ships were moving through deep space, but he dismissed them as irrelevant. The soft creatures were probably running away, fleeing to the edges of the galaxy where the Dominion could hunt them down at leisure. The attack on New Helena had been his idea. He had convinced the High Council that humanity needed to be taught a lesson. They were growing too confident, spreading across too many worlds, building too many ships. A demonstration of power would remind them of their place in the galaxy. He had expected fear. He had expected surrender. He had expected humanity to come crawling to the negotiating table, begging for mercy. He had not expected what was coming. The first warning came from a sensor station on the outer edge of the system. Something was approaching at incredible speed. The readings made no sense. The objects were too fast, too small, too numerous to be ships. They were missiles. Humanity had launched them hours ago, accelerating them to nearly half the speed of light. They carried nuclear warheads powerful enough to vaporize anything they touched, and there were hundreds of them, spreading across the system in a wave of silent death. The defensive fleet had 200 ships. 30 of them were stationed at the outer perimeter, forming the first line of defense against any attack. They saw the missiles coming. They tried to shoot them down. They managed to destroy perhaps a dozen. The rest found their targets. 30 warships vanished in nuclear fire. The explosions were so bright that they could be seen from the surface of Ran. High Commander watched the sensor displays and felt something he had not experienced in decades: fear. Behind the missile barrage came the human fleet. Admiral Moore commanded the assault from the bridge of the Resolute. His ship shuddered as its engines pushed it forward at maximum speed. Around him, 300 human warships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. They had trained for this moment. They had prepared for months. Now they were executing their plan with mechanical precision. Captain Laura coordinated targeting data from her station. Her voice was calm as she directed weapons fire, but could see the grim satisfaction in her eyes. She had lost family on New Helena. Now she was getting justice. The fleet scrambled to respond. 170 ships remained, and they were some of the most powerful vessels in the Dominion. Their weapons were designed to destroy human cruisers with single shots. Their shields were supposed to be impenetrable. Human engineers had studied technology for decades. Dr. Collins and her colleagues had provided detailed information about weaknesses. The weapons humanity brought to this battle were specifically designed to exploit those weaknesses. The first battleship lasted 12 seconds against concentrated human fire. Its shields collapsed under the assault, and then its hull was torn apart by precision strikes. The crew had no time to escape. They were simply gone, reduced to atoms in the cold void of space. Commander Price led his destroyer squadron against the enemy flank. His small ships were fast and nimble, dancing through enemy fire like insects around a predator. They could not track them. They could not hit them. They could only watch as the destroyers tore through their formation. 2 of 5 ships were destroyed in the first hour. He saw them explode on his tactical display, watched the life signs of their crews blink out in an instant. He felt grief and fury, but he did not stop. He could not stop. This battle would decide the fate of humanity. Lieutenant flew his fighter through the chaos of the battle. He had been scared before the fighting started. Now he felt nothing but cold focus. His training had taken over, guiding his hands as he targeted enemy vessels and fired his weapons. He watched a carrier burn. Escape pods launched from its hull, desperate crew members trying to flee the destruction. Human ships ignored them. The orders were clear: Military targets were to be destroyed. Escape pods were not to be rescued. Did not feel satisfaction. He did not feel horror. He felt only the weight of necessity. They had made their choice when they attacked New Helena. Now they were learning the consequences. High Commander attempted to surrender 4 hours into the battle. He broadcast on all frequencies, offering to negotiate, promising concessions, begging for mercy. Admiral Moore did not respond. The transmission was ignored as if it had never been sent. The commander did not understand. He had been taught that humans were civilized creatures who followed rules and respected surrender. He did not know that the rules had changed. He did not know that there would be no mercy. His command station was destroyed an hour later. He died still not understanding what had gone wrong. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the defensive fleet had ceased to exist. 170 warships had been reduced to debris and wreckage. The orbital platforms were burning, their weapons silenced forever. The path to Ran was open. Admiral Moore looked at the planet on his. Billions of lived on its surface. They had homes and families, jobs and dreams. Most of them had probably never even heard of New Helena. But their leaders had made a choice. Their military had carried out orders. Their government had decided that murdering millions of humans was acceptable. Now it was time for the final terms. The human fleet moved into position around Ran. Weapons were charged. Targeting systems locked onto the planet below. Every soldier and officer knew what was about to happen. Some of them felt sick. Some of them felt righteous. Most of them felt nothing at all. They were just doing their jobs. They were just following orders. They were just making sure that no alien species would ever think about attacking humanity again. The first strike was complete. The real work was about to begin. The High Council gathered in their ancient chamber, a great hall built from black stone that had stood for 10,000 years. They were the rulers of the Dominion, the and most powerful of their kind. For generations, they had guided their people with strength and cunning. Now they sat in silence, watching images of their burning fleet on display screens. Counselor A was the eldest of them. He had served on the council for 200 years, surviving countless political battles and military campaigns. He had approved the attack on New Helena because he believed it was necessary. Humanity was growing too strong. Something had to be done. He had not expected this response. The human fleet hung in orbit above Ran like a ring of death. 300 warships pointed their weapons at the planet below, ready to rain fire on the surface at a moment's notice. The Dominion's mighty defense fleet was gone. There was nothing left to protect them. A communication request came from the human flagship. The council debated whether to accept it. Some argued that they should refuse, that responding would show weakness. Others said that they needed to negotiate to buy time to find a way out of this disaster. In the end, they accepted the transmission. General appeared on their screens. She was an older human female with short gray hair and cold eyes. She did not smile. She did not threaten. She simply looked at them as if they were insects that needed to be stepped on. "You know why we are here," she said. Her voice was flat and emotionless. "You know what you did, now you will hear our terms." Counselor A tried to speak, but the general continued without pause. "The Dominion will disarm completely. Your fleet will be surrendered to human control. Your military bases will be dismantled. Your weapons factories will be converted to civilian use. Any vessel larger than a cargo transport will be confiscated and destroyed." The council members shifted in their seats. These terms were harsh but perhaps acceptable. They could rebuild in time. They could regain their strength. General was not finished. "Your colonies will accept human military governors. Your communications will be monitored. Your technology development will be supervised. Any research that could be used for military purposes will be terminated immediately." Now the council began to murmur. This was not a peace treaty. This was a demand for complete surrender. This was slavery. "You have 48 hours to accept these terms," General continued. "If you refuse, we will begin systematic bombardment of your military and government facilities. Your civilization will be dismantled piece by piece until nothing remains but ashes and memories." Counselor finally found his voice. "This is madness," he said. "You cannot do this. There are laws, treaties, principles of civilized behavior. The other species of the galaxy will not allow this aggression." General looked at him with contempt. "The Treaty of Prime guaranteed the safety of civilian populations. You burned 2.3 million of our people to death. You do not get to lecture us about civilized behavior." "That attack was unauthorized," said desperately. "It was the work of rogue military commanders. The Council did not approve it. We will punish those responsible. We will pay reparations. We will do whatever is necessary to make amends." The general did not respond. She simply cut the transmission, leaving the council staring at empty screens. Admiral Moore watched the exchange from the bridge of the Resolute. He felt no sympathy for the leaders. They were lying, of course. The attack on New Helena had been approved at the highest levels. Intercepted communications proved it beyond any doubt. But even if they were telling the truth, it would not matter. The time for negotiation had passed. The time for understanding and forgiveness had ended when those colonists died. Captain Laura stood beside him. "Do you think they will accept?" she asked. Shook his head. "No, they still think we are bluffing. They still believe that we are too civilized to do what needs to be done." Laura nodded. She understood. They had studied humanity for decades. They had observed human laws and customs, human mercy and restraint. They had concluded that humans were soft creatures who would never commit acts of true brutality. They had failed to understand one crucial thing. Humans were merciful by choice, not by nature. They showed restraint because they believed in peace. But when that peace was shattered, when their families were murdered, when their trust was betrayed, humans could be the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. Dr. Collins watched the deadline approach from her research station. She had spent years working with scientists, believing that cooperation was possible. Now she was helping to plan the destruction of their civilization. She did not feel guilty. She felt tired and sad and empty, but not guilty. They had made their choice. They had decided that human lives were worthless. They had burned innocent people to death because they were afraid of human potential. Now they were going to learn what that potential really meant. Commander Price kept his remaining destroyers on patrol around the planet. His squadron had lost 2 ships in the battle, good crews and loyal friends. He mourned them, but he did not regret their sacrifice. They had died fighting for something important. They had died making sure that humanity would never be victimized again. Lieutenant sat in the pilot-ready room of the Defiance, waiting for orders. He had killed people today. He had watched ships explode and lives end. He had done terrible things because terrible things were necessary. He wondered what his parents would think if they could see him now. They had raised him to be kind and peaceful. They had taught him to value life and seek understanding. They had believed in the goodness of all sentient beings. Still believed in those things, but he also believed in justice. He believed in consequences. He believed that some actions were so evil that they demanded a response beyond words and diplomacy. The 48 hours passed. The High Council sent a message rejecting the terms. They demanded negotiations. They proposed a summit meeting. They offered partial disarmament and financial compensation. General did not reply. The terms had been final. The terms had been absolute. And now they were about to learn what those words really meant. The bombardment began on the 49th hour. Admiral Moore gave the order from the bridge of the Resolute. His voice did not waver. His hands did not shake. He had made peace with what he was about to do. That had left him no choice. The first strikes targeted military installations. Massive kinetic projectiles fell from orbit, striking with the force of small nuclear weapons. Army bases vanished in clouds of dust and fire. Naval yards collapsed into rubble. Weapons factories were reduced to craters. They had believed that humanity was bluffing. Counselor, I had been so confident that the soft humans would never actually attack us. He had told the council that accepting the terms would be a sign of weakness, that they needed only to wait, and the humans would lose their nerve. He watched the bombardment from the council chamber and realized how wrong he had been. General coordinated the attack from her flagship. She did not enjoy what she was doing. She took no pleasure in the destruction raining down on Ran, but she understood its necessity. The galaxy needed to see what happened when someone broke faith with humanity. Government buildings were next. The administrative centers of the Dominion exploded one by one, wiped from existence by precision strikes. Communication towers fell. Power plants went dark. The infrastructure that held civilization together was being systematically dismantled. Commander Price watched from his destroyer as the planet below burned. He thought about his 2 lost ships, about the crews who had died following his orders. He thought about New Helena, about the 2.3 million people who had been murdered by weapons. He felt no regret for what was happening now. The bombardment continued for 3 days. Human warships worked in shifts, maintaining constant pressure on the planet. They hit every military target, every government facility, every building that had anything to do with the war machine that had attacked humanity. But the civilian population centers were spared. This was deliberate. General had been very clear in her orders. Humanity was not interested in genocide. They were not trying to exterminate the species. They were trying to break the power of the Dominion completely and absolutely. When the fires finally cooled, General broadcast her message again. The terms remained unchanged. Complete disarmament, human governors, permanent supervision. They could accept and survive, or they could refuse and watch their civilization collapse entirely. The remaining colonies received the same message. They saw what had happened to their. They understood what would happen to them if they resisted. One by one, they surrendered. Counselor A was captured by human ground forces a week after the bombardment ended. He was found hiding in an underground bunker, surrounded by the last of his loyal guards. He expected to be executed. He believed that the humans would kill him for what he had ordered at New Helena. Instead, he was put on trial. Human lawyers presented evidence of his crimes. Survivors from New Helena about the attack. The intercepted communications that proved the Council's involvement were displayed for the entire galaxy to see. A was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment. He would spend his remaining years in a human detention facility, forced to watch as the Dominion he had once ruled was transformed into a puppet state. Captain Laura was promoted to admiral after the war. She spent years overseeing the occupation of space, ensuring that the terms of surrender were enforced. She never forgot her family on New Helena. She never forgave them for what they had done. Commander Price, now captain, was assigned to occupation duty on Ran itself. He walked through ruined cities and rebuilt them according to human specifications. He watched former enemies become obedient subjects. He made sure that they would never threaten humanity again. Lieutenant returned to Earth a decorated officer. He had proven himself in battle, earning medals and commendations for his bravery. But he never spoke about the war. He never talked about the ships he had destroyed or the people he had killed. He simply returned to duty and waited for the next assignment. Dr. Collins published her research on society, documenting how their culture had led to the attack on New Helena. Her work was studied by human diplomats and military officers, used to prevent future conflicts with alien species. She never returned to her original research on cooperation. That dream had died with the colonists of New Helena. Admiral Moore retired after the war. He had served humanity for 40 years, rising from a young officer at the treaty signing to the commander who had led the assault on the. He had seen the best and worst of both species. In his final address, he spoke of the lessons learned from the conflict. "We offered thee our friendship," he said. "We signed a treaty in good faith. We believed that peace was possible between our species. They responded by murdering 2.3 million of our people." He paused, looking at the assembled officers and diplomats. "We did not start this war. We did not want this war, but when they forced it upon us, we ended it. We ended it so completely that no one will ever forget what happened here. That is the lesson for the galaxy. Humanity does not seek conflict. We extend our hands in friendship whenever possible. But if you break faith with us, if you attack our people, if you murder our families, there will be consequences." The Treaty of Prime was replaced by the RAN Accords. The new document was written entirely by human diplomats. It established humanity as the dominant power in the region and reduced the Dominion to a vassal state under permanent human supervision. Other alien civilizations took note. They had watched the war unfold. They had seen what humanity did to those who betrayed them. Some were horrified by the brutality. Others were impressed by the efficiency. All of them understood the message. Humanity was not to be underestimated. Humanity was not to be attacked. Humanity was not to be betrayed. The stars had promised peace once. That promise had been broken by treachery. Now a new promise hung in the void between worlds. It was a promise of consequences. It was a promise of justice. It was a promise that humanity would always respond with final and absolute terms. And the galaxy would never forget.